scary stories. My first apartment after college was delightfully cute, secured with a couple my age that I had met through the PNW music scene. I was young, excited, and so ready to start living the dream in the big city. I started a job at a local elementary school working as a teaching aide for 3rd and 4th graders. I really enjoyed the natural exuberance and curiosity of children and really gave all to my students. I got to spend every day continuing to learn and play, and then went out to music shows and lived it up with my favorite people afterwards. How could life be any better? The neighbors on our floor were polite enough. They lived 15 feet down the closed hallway we shared. When we opened our door, theirs was right there. They were a significantly older couple, so we didn't interact much. However, there were occasions where I'd interact with him while he had their cute little dog. For a few moments while coming home with groceries or headed out to a show here and there, we would chat. To this day, I simultaneously regret and am relieved by the fact that we never exchanged names. I didn't know his name, but he never knew mine either, I hope. I'd moved in the week after I'd graduated in May. The following January, I was waiting for a lift to take me to my partner's house. It was supposed to be there in 1 minute. That turned into 10, and it felt much, much longer than that. I had been outside for 2 minutes when I turned to go back inside. I stopped, though, because I saw a stumbling shadow and heard it muttering. I stopped because it may have needed help. The shape in the darkness turned out to be my neighbor, drunk, and he put his hand on my shoulder to steady himself. We started talking, joking about how much he had had to drink. Then he looked up at the window of his apartment and muttered, "I fucking hate that bitch, but I sure feel better once I see you every day." Time slowed down. What did he just say? Every day? But we didn't. Something inside me stilled me, told me to listen and to not talk, but just listen and figure out what exactly he is after first. Don't say anything. That comes later. I managed a weak smile as the tears and screams dissolved deep inside. He kept talking, told me how he had watched me take out my garbage, do my laundry, wait to hear me, see me as I had my comings and goings, which outfits he liked watching my body move in, what he wanted to do to me, how he felt that way since the moment he saw me on the day I was moving in. And I listened. I didn't just stay quiet, I listened, because I knew that there had come a point where he'd stop talking and I'd have to fill the hole, and what I'd say would determine what happened next. The moment came. He was looking into my eyes, the way we had been the entire time. He had his hand on my shoulder, slowly moving me toward the alley, away from the street. It was so slow, but I noticed. I slowed him right back, though my toes were digging into the ground through my shoes because he was too drunk to notice if I resisted there, but he would have felt if I would have tightened up anywhere else. I had so much fear in my body as I played that fool, as I filled the time begging and screaming inside my mind for that fucking car to come and get me. Where in the fuck was the car? But I didn't do anything. I told my now confessed stalker in a saccharine voice, a character of my own, that was sweet enough to assure him that I'd never been complimented like that before, that my own boyfriend never paid attention to my outfits like that it was so sweet of him to actually say these things. It was all bullshit, but I had to. If I would have screamed, he would have moved his hand from my shoulder to my throat. If I had stayed silent, he would have become angry and his hand would have moved from my shoulder to my throat. I would have been in that alley in minutes. I kept going, complimenting him My inner self detached and watched as I somehow kept playing nice with him. I stared into his eyes, his face, for all that time, but even now, it only looks like shadows when I try to think of it. The car finally came. My stalker walked me to the car and waved me off. The gathering storm inside of me was quiet as the car started moving, and the shadow that I had first seen on the street that night drifted away. Once it was far enough away from us, the tears and screaming started. Then I couldn't sleep for 3 days. I lost my job on day 2 when I refused to come in due to not being okay with exposing the kids to a seriously traumatized adult, especially one that they looked up to and loved. My coworker told them that I was sick instead, and they sent me my cards. I never saw my students again. I went to the hospital on day 4 when I knew that if I didn't go and finally sleep, I'd lose my mind. My blood work showed that I'd developed a stress-related chronic illness. I called my landlord and the police on day 5. My landlord told me that the apartment was under her name and that he couldn't give his name to me. My stalker was not on the lease. The 3 police officers that came instead surrounded me and asked me about my mental health history when I made the mistake of saying that I had been victimized before in a different way, and that I was having a difficult time emotionally processing what was happening to me because of it. I did everything right, and nothing came out of it. Day 6, I went to their door. I got called a whore by his girlfriend, and the door was slammed in my face. I was too poor to move. I was too sick to move. My partner wouldn't let me move in with him. I didn't know enough people in the city. I was away from my family, and they were emotionally abusive. Staying with them was not an option. No one took my pain seriously, so I lived there until our lease was up. In June, my roommates were sympathetic the first few times I asked them to come with me to take out the garbage or do my laundry downstairs, but they couldn't do it every time. My heart broke like a child's. I felt like a little kid begging for help to escape the boogeyman in my closet. Nobody understood how terrifying and how painfully real he was. Nobody that was a person, that is. Thankfully, though, I wasn't alone. I was able to navigate that horrible, terrifying, exhausting period of my life that mainly consisted of sleeping and crying in my room in between rounds of medication, before checking and double checking and triple checking the peephole and listening through the door before quickly and silently doing chores or darting out to live my life in small bursts because I had my cat. My sweet Ruby, she was the only living thing that never said a word but actually helped to protect me. Every time my stalker was in the hallway right outside of our door, she'd jump onto her little chair in our living room and stare at the door attentively with purpose because she was looking at him, because sometimes he wouldn't even make a sound, because she wanted to teach me to know when he was there, the way that she knew how he was there, and I learned. He never caught me again. On the day that I moved out, his girlfriend spoke to my roommate and told her that she wanted to apologize to me. Walking down the hallway towards the apartment felt like approaching a tomb. It felt emotionally dead, and she looked the part. She told me how he had abused her, financially, physically, emotionally, and how he had beaten her dog and drank and forced her to let him be that way. How she was so terrified of him that it took her entire family to kick him out. I listened again, the same way that I had listened to her ex-boyfriend, because his departure had happened 2 months ago, and she didn't tell me, or anyone. 2 months. I didn't have to filter fear this time, but rage. I listened to her. I got up, said thank you, and left. I assured her that I was happy for her freedom, and that I was now going to go enjoy mine, and I did. Ruby peacefully passed away about 2 years later, with her little face in my hands as I looked into her sweet, warm eyes one last time. My tiniest hero and greatest friend made sure that I was safe as long as she lived with me, and I returned the favor. To Ruby, there are no words that adequately describe the voiceless, profound love that you channeled through your tiny body to me, the human lucky enough to have loved you for 2 beautiful, life-changing years together. Thank you for giving me the ultimate gift that will live with me always. To my neighbor, my stalker, let's not ever meet again because I may be the one to not let you leave next time. I am a 20-year-old female, started an OnlyFans account over the summer to support myself through school, and things were great until I posted my Amazon wish list. Amazon doesn't release your address to people who gift you items, but third-party sellers can, and that's where I went wrong. By the way, not trying to promote it here, this is a very frightening story, and I felt like it should be shared. In late July, I got a puppy. One night, around 2 a.m., I took him outside to go to the bathroom. While he was doing his business, I noticed a car parked outside of my family's house. I saw a figure in the car and could tell they were looking at me, but I couldn't make out their face because it was pitch black outside. Feeling a bit uneasy, I picked up my puppy to take him back inside, and when I started to move, the car parked in my driveway. I sprinted back inside and locked the door, but they never approached my house. The next morning, I went to check the mail. There was an envelope addressed to my OnlyFans name with $20 in it, but no notes. I was currently still at home with my parents, who had no idea about my OnlyFans account, so I didn't mention it to them. A week later, I moved back to college town to get ready to start school. At this time, I had stopped posting for the time being until I could figure out how they got my address. I've watched enough crime shows to know there's a possibility I could be in danger. I live in a duplex with a gated parking lot. For reference, one morning I was planning on vlogging my trip to Target because I was planning on starting a YouTube channel in the near future, since OnlyFans felt unsafe. When I got in my car, it had been ransacked, and my vlogging camera was missing. I know it's my fault for leaving it in my car, but I was using it the night before, and since I lived in a gated area, I didn't think I would be unsafe. It wasn't in plain sight either. I had it hidden in my glove box. I used the camera to film my content, and the SD card that was in there had all of my unreleased photos and videos. I know they stole it just for the SD card. Anyway, this is where the story gets weird. There are cameras outside in the parking lot, so we were able to watch this person break into my car and find the camera, and they didn't touch any of the 7 other cars on the lot. They knew which car was mine, which suggests they had been watching me for a bit. After they got the camera, they walked around the duplex until stopping near my window. My bedroom faces an outside street, and my blinds are broken, so it's very easy to see in. I have a curtain, but it doesn't cover my window all the way. This person watched me sleep for an hour or so. I have no idea why they didn't try to break in, but thank God that they didn't. This person then sold the camera to a pawn shop, and since I know the serial number, the police were able to find it. However, my SD card was still missing. I believe the police are still trying to track them down, but I have broken my lease and moved into a new place, so hopefully that will keep me safe. Hey guy who terrorized me at home and my apartment and stole my camera, let's not meet again.
TLDR. While camping, this guy we met was nice at first, but then started getting creepy at night. He apologizes for the prank and then does it again, but this time actually trying to kill us. My husband and I were planning a camping trip to Florida where my sister lives. I'll be calling him husband through this because he prefers I didn't name him. The national forest we were going to was on the way back, so we decided it was a good round trip to first stay with them for a night, then venture out into the woods and set up camp. I know it was some enclosed protected area that had park rangers and all that, but I just felt excited to be out in the woods, thinking I was alone with my husband, or alone with whatever could be lurking in the woods at night. Maybe like a ferocious trash panda or an evil squirrel. We had a little pop-up tent that uses bendy lines to set up. So we packed up and left for my sister's house first. It was a really long, boring drive, so we were stopping every so often to get out and stretch ourselves and look for somewhere to eat. Not only was most of the places we stopped at complete dumps, but there were surprisingly a lot of rude people everywhere we went. Once we got into Florida, that changed though. I think we stopped in Tallahassee first, and immediately we noticed the attitude change. I was wanting to move here with my sister. I think I found an excuse. We arrived in Tampa at my sister's place. Long story short, we sat here and had a great time having dinner and drinks, bitching about old times and bitching about people we used to know. Just like we always did when we got together. Come to think of it, that's all we did. So we spent the night here because she had a guest room, and gave us one last good night's sleep before we went into the woods for our adventure. I was still excited about it. By a good night's sleep, I mean I tossed and giggled all night when my husband tried to sleep, and couldn't because I kept talking to him like a child. I regret nothing. I'm serious, I had way too much to drink. There's nothing like being able to actually be yourself around your own family. I suggest it to anyone who's reading this. The next afternoon when we finally got up, I didn't feel much like giggling or carrying on anymore. I was a little bit sick and still wanted to go. We packed up the little bit we used at my sister's and left. I was still a bit sick and still wanted to go. We packed up the little bit we used at my sister's and left. I was complaining the entire way, mostly for the joke of it, but I actually did have a little bit of a hangover. My husband, however, seemed like it didn't faze him. He knows me. I'll complain hard, but I won't ruin anything we're doing. We decided on a national forest called Hillsborough River State Park. If you've ever been there, it's a little place off a nowhere highway between Tampa and a place called Zephyr Hills. To my knowledge, this was one of the only parks in the area. We pulled in and almost immediately started setting up. We didn't explore it first or anything, we just did it. That's part of the fun for me, is building the shelter. Oh, and basically, there were a ton of other people there. I was severely disappointed, but I couldn't complain. They were there for the same reason, I assume. One guy we set up next to actually lived out there though. I get that you like being out there, but living out there? No thanks. We talked to our woodsy neighbor for a little bit and found out he was a really nice guy. My husband and I went off into one of those little trails they had out there for hiking. We eventually found one that led to a river that runs all the way through Florida. I told my husband to throw me in so I could float to the sea, but he didn't think that was a good idea. So we walked around with each other and just enjoyed the woods and the very few people we saw here and there every few hours. Really, it was like you went to the campsite and there were people everywhere. You go off into the trails and stuff, and there's nobody. It was like the Twilight Zone. Keeping my strange fantasies to myself, we went back to the campsite after it had gotten dark. Oh, and if you come down here, bring some bug repellent. We didn't. We regret it. The first night with the guy next to us, Donnie, was just great. We shared a fire pit and was just hanging out with him. It was just him and no one else in the area seemed to care at all, so we were a little noisy for a while. We tried to keep it down for the people sleeping, but higher-pitched voices carried further. So all the excitement wore me out after around 1 or 2. 2 a.m. I couldn't really tell the time since I hadn't checked the time at all and wasn't going to. I went into the tent and passed out before I could get into my sleeping bag. My husband said he did the same a while after I went, but he chose not to get into his bag. It was a bit hot. I don't know what time in the morning it was, but I was woken up by Donnie scratching on the tent. He asked if I wanted coffee as my husband snored away. I thought it was a bit strange. He'd wake me up first, seeing as I was the one who was furthest away from his campsite. I told him no thanks and fell back asleep. I guess he got the hint and went away. Then in the middle of my dream, I woke up and thought it was also strange that he only woke me up and not even try to wake up my husband. Once the afternoon rolled around, my in and out state of sleep finally broke and I was like a cat that had just been scared awake. My husband woke up shortly after, but I went over to Donnie and just said, "I'll have that coffee now." He made the comment, "I guess you guys are usually night owls, huh?" I confirmed that to definitely be the case and had some of the worst coffee I'd ever tasted with him. Seriously, it was pretty gross. I told him it was gross, but he laughed and said he couldn't taste it at all. After my husband finally got up, he drank the rest of the coffee and we ate a little of the canned food we brought with us. Not too long after we'd gotten up, the sky started getting dark and I felt my energy level rise. I was finally awake and ready to do stuff. I told my husband we should go exploring in the woods tonight, and he liked that idea. Spoilers, we used a combination of the moonlight and some really weak flashlights to get up in and out of the woods. It was extremely fun. When we got back to the campsite, Donnie was already asleep and the night was still young. We explored the woods a bit, more until I got tired and we headed back. We decided to spend a nice little evening inside the tent in the pitch black dark, listening to the sounds and quietly talking with one another. All of a sudden, I felt the poke of something sharp in my back through the tent wall. I squeaked and jumped up, spinning around to look towards that wall. It was a reaction. I know I couldn't actually see anything. I told my husband that I felt something sharp poke me in the back. He pulled his flashlight out and unzipped the tent. We looked around and there was nothing there. This is the part where people usually argue about whether it really happened or not. But we didn't do that. We looked around the tent and then went back inside. This time we didn't zip up the tent back up, but faced the opening. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps a little away from us and kept an eye on it. I listened to them until they were close by and turned on a flashlight and ran to see what the hell it was. It was Johnny sneaking around with a stick towards our tent. I got a little pissed and told him that wasn't cool. My husband really didn't get pissed off, but he did back me up by saying he thought it was a little dirty. Donnie, with clear disappointment on his face, told us he was just trying to prank us. I told him I didn't like that kind of thing and not to do it again. He apologized to me and I told him I'd forget about it. He went back to bed and my husband and I did as well, since it was going to be early morning. The next afternoon, Donnie didn't wake us up or make coffee. Not like I was expecting him to, but had kind of a sour feeling attitude. He didn't say anything outright mean or do anything. he just kind of kept quiet and didn't talk much. We didn't really want to blame him for anything, and we sat down and tried to make conversation. But it seemed like he really didn't want that. We left him alone and went off on another little adventure by ourselves. We really enjoyed ourselves and said we would probably stay another night after this. After it got dark, we were still in the woods and without our flashlights. I kept getting the I'm scared shakes, but I was kind of enjoying that. My husband was kind of intentionally freaking out because he could barely see anything himself, he told me. The woods still had moonlight, but not really much since the clouds were blocking most of it. This is what we came out here for, though. So we were somewhat lost in the woods and trying to find our way back. Not our best moment. We eventually found our way out and back to the site where Donnie seemed to have gone to bed already. I told my husband that I felt kind of bad for getting on to him last night, but I didn't come out here for pranks. We decided to sit in our tent in the dark again and talked. Oddly enough, we talked about our first times camping, and neither of us could really remember the details. All of a sudden, our tent just collapsed on top of us, and I had one of the rods snap and I felt it puncture my leg. The rods were fiberglass or something because they can really bend, but if they snap, they are extremely sharp. I screamed and cried because there was something in my leg. My husband hears me crying and finds a flashlight to see why. He fucking absolutely flipped when he saw the rod in my leg and quickly ripped it out to tie it up with a shirt and went outside to Donnie. I could hear my husband yelling at him and cussing and all that. I finally got the breath I needed to scoot out of the tent and saw what Donnie had done and what my husband did to Donnie. Apparently this asshole had thrown a 5-gallon bucket of cement through the tent and it missed me by mere inches. Donnie claimed it was another prank and he threw it in a safe area of the tent. Well, he didn't hit either of us with the bucket, but his stupid action got me stabbed in the leg. My husband ripped him across the face with a solid knuckle and knocked him out cold. My husband said we were packing up and leaving right there, and I didn't have any arguments. I wanted to get away from that psycho as soon as possible, and before he woke up. My husband made me sit in the car with my leg elevated and wouldn't let me help pack. But he got it all done himself in a few minutes and we were out. The first thing we did was head to a hospital to get my leg redone. The doctor cleaned the wound out and said it didn't go that deep, and that I wouldn't need stitches or anything. I ended up with those flat patches and keeping it clean. It healed up just fine. So that's what happened in the woods, and I'm sure Donnie won't be pranking anyone else that comes in after what he did and got back. I don't care what you call it or how you look at it. That concrete bucket, wherever he got it, could have killed one of us, or at very least broken several bones. I told my husband on the way back to my sister's place that I hope he broke his jaw. He did say he felt something in their crumble, so no telling. We told my sister everything that happened, and she asked if we had informed the police. But we told her no. We took care of him ourselves. We stayed at her house another night, and went back on the long journey home the next day. Truthfully, I think he's pissed off I'd gotten on to him, and he wanted to hurt me. That's why the bucket went my way. When I think back on it, I get scared when the realization hits me that I could have been hit in the head and died. Or even worse, my husband got hit and died. I wouldn't have been able to live on then, and I don't know what I would have done. It's best for me not to think on it. If you go out into the woods like that to camp, please be safe, and don't set up camp next to a freak psycho.